You're playing D&D and you want to play Spellcaster, but none of the rules make any sense. Don't worry, in this video, we're going to teach you everything you need to know about spellcasting in one video. Let's go, logo. We're going to discuss everything from spell slots to types of spells, how to cast them, to actually casting them, making saves, and more. First up, let's take a quick moment to break down spell slots, since this seems to confuse a lot of people. Spell slots are the number of spells your character can physically cast. Think of these spell slots as ammunition, okay? Each spell is a bullet, and when you use the spells, or fire the gun, if you will, you lose the bullet. Your spell slots are invaluable, so use them wisely. When you use them up, you can gain these spell slots back by taking a rest. Your class will mention if you regain your slots after a long rest or a short rest, and it's all described for each class in the spellcasting section of your specific class. It's important to not confuse spells with racial traits. Some races, like tieflings, allow you to cast things innately as part of the race you are. These do not require spell slots. Spells also have different levels. Spells of higher level tend to be more powerful, and the first thing you need to remember is that spell levels and your character's level have nothing to do with each other. Just because you're level 5 doesn't mean you can cast a level 5 spell. The table in your class's section of the player's handbook will tell you at what level you unlock new spell levels. Cantrips are spells that are low level, so easy to cast that your character can cast them whenever they want at will without expending spell slots. These are fun spells to use and can be really handy, but remember, they are very low level. So for those of you trying to push the cantrips to the limit, come on. Now for anything higher than a cantrip, things can get tricky depending on the class, so here's a quick breakdown of the two methods that most classes fall under. Notice I said most. There is the spells known and the spells prepared, okay? First up is the prepared spells list. Druids, clerics, and paladins know all the spells they need. It's already a part of their knowledge, and as long as you're the right level for the spell, you'll have access to them. The catch is, with these classes every morning in quiet prayer or meditation, you have to choose X amount of spells to prepare for that day, meaning you can only use those specific spells all day. So with these classes, you don't get to just use any of the spells you want. You have to plan ahead and pick the number of spells that you're allowed to have at once. This is called number of spells prepared, and the number goes up as you level up. Check it out under your specific class in the player's handbook to find out how many you get at your level. Wizards are also kind of in this list in that they have spells that they need to prepare, but they don't have access to a long spell list like the druid, cleric, or paladin. Instead, wizards must find and learn spells to put them into their book, but as their list gets longer, they have to start choosing which ones to prepare for the day as the other classes do. The upside to the wizard is the vast number of spells they can learn. Watch out for liches, guys. And now, the second method, spells known. Sorcerers, bards, and rangers don't need to prepare any spells at all. They already know a handful of spells inherently, and there's no need to prepare them. They can cast them as long as they have access to the spell's level and have spell slots. But the catch for them is that they know fewer spells in general. Warlocks are the weirdos of the spellcasting group. They already know their spells just like bards, rangers, and sorcerers. The only difference is that they cast their spells at the highest possible level for them. Why? Well, we'll get into warlocks in their own video. Just know if you choose to be a warlock, it's going to take some getting used to. So now you understand that each class is a little different. This is something I wish I had learned early. Seriously, I spent hours trying to figure out why druids did one thing and sorcerers did another. Luckily, I'm here to help you and tell you, basically, not all classes are the same, so find the class that you like and learn that one. You also understand that, with a couple exceptions, your class will either have to prepare spells they already know, or will know spells already from a shorter list. And you also know that spell levels are different from character levels, so now it's time to talk about the actual mechanics of spellcasting in the game. Every class has a different spellcasting ability. This means that their spells come from either their charisma, their wisdom, or their intelligence, those handy stats generally on the left of your sheet. Your class will tell you which one it uses in the player's handbook. Once you know that, each class will tell you specifically what your spell attack bonus and your spell save DC are. Your spell attack bonus is the bonus you add whenever you roll to hit someone with a spell, and your spell save DC is the number the enemy or target of your spell will have to roll in order to save from the effects of your spell. When you cast a spell, it'll be one or the other. Usually your spell save DC is 8, plus your spellcasting ability modifier, so if you're a bard, you use charisma, and if you have a charisma of 18, that's a +3, if you look at the table in the player's handbook, plus your proficiency bonus. Your proficiency bonus is the same for all classes, and it goes up the higher level you are to a maximum of +5. So in this case, a level 1 would be 8, +3 from their charisma, and +2 for the level 1 proficiency bonus. 8 plus 3 plus 2 is 13. That would be your spell save DC, and whenever your target has to make a save against your DC, they would have to roll higher than a 13. Does that make sense? Your spell attack bonus is your proficiency bonus. Again, this goes up at higher levels, plus your modifier. So whether that's your charisma, intelligence, or wisdom, it changes from class to class, but now you can see why having high stats can help make you more powerful. So that brings us to the next point. Spells work differently, and each spell describes how it works. When I first started, I assumed every spell needed to be saved from, or that you always had to roll to hit with your spells. It was really confusing. Some spells automatically happen, and anyone in the area has to try to save from it, meaning they have to roll higher than your spell save DC. Other spells work like attacks, in that you have to aim and try to hit a target, like with Eldritch Blast. These don't require a spell save. If they hit, and you roll the damage. Then there's some spells that simply have an effect, such as the cantrip Druidcraft, which just makes flowers bloom, or the higher level spell Wish. Again, every spell states very specifically what it does and what rolls need to happen, so when you learn a new spell, just read it. Up next, we're talking about spell components. Spells require components to make happen. Now, there are 3 components to a spell. You have verbal, somatic, and material. Verbal spells are easy to understand. You need to be able to speak. You can flavor this however you want. Maybe it's an elvish chant if you're an elf, or some ancient language long dead if you want to go darker, but whatever the case, if you can't talk, you can't cast the spell. But what about characters that are mute? Well, that's where you talk to the DM and figure that out. In the end, it's up to them, but any good DM will be willing to work with you. Somatic is similar, but this is hand motions. Maybe this is some Doctor Strange runes that appear, or maybe it's the Full Metal Alchemist drawing on the ground. However you want to flavor it, you need your hands free. If your hands are tied, no spell. Sorry. Now the question comes up, what if I want to play a character that's missing limbs? That's okay. Again, you can talk to your DM and figure that out. For me, it's all about the intent. You don't need fingers to use somatic components, but you need the mobility of the arm, or some notion of a phantom limb. So in my games, if your arms are tied, spectral or not, no cigar. And lastly, there are the material components to a spell. These are items, objects, or ingredients that the spell requires in order to function. There are lots of components, and they can vary for each spell, like a lot. From a handful of fur to a full-on diamond. An adder's stomach? What the fuck is that? Now, for most spells, you can choose to use an arcane focus. This basically channels your spells through an object like a crystal or a necklace and allows you to not have to use the material side of spells. With one exception. If a spell states that it requires a component to consume, then you still need to find that material. An example of this is the Revivify spell. The spell clearly states that it requires diamonds worth 300 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. This means that you need to find some diamonds that the DM says are worth at least 300 gold pieces, and the spell then uses them and destroys them as part of the spell. Yes, spells can get very expensive. Each spell also has a time to cast the spell and a spell duration. The description of each spell will tell you exactly how long it takes to cast the spell and how long it lasts. For example, Identify takes 1 minute to cast but only lasts 1 round of 6 seconds because the spell duration is instantaneous. Other spells may last an hour or even 24 hours. Each spell will also tell you if it's a bonus action, action, or reaction. Which brings us to ritual spells. Some spells will be marked as rituals. This means that your character can take some time, usually about an additional 10 minutes to the spell's already existing time, but again, read the class spellcasting section, and your character can take the time to cast the spell as a ritual, which means they don't need to use a spell slot to cast it. Neat. Now, when you're in combat, it's important to remember that you have different level spells. So, what if you have a level 1 spell, but you're all out of level 1 spell slots? That's okay. If you have a spell slot of higher level, you can cast a lower level spell. But you can't use your last level 1 spell slot to cast it. Sorry. You can cast weaker spells with higher slots, but you can't cast higher level spells in lower slots. It just doesn't make sense, y'all. Also, in combat, remember that you cannot cast more than 1 spell with one exception. You can cast 2 spells as long as one of them is a cantrip and one of them is a bonus action. Spells like Featherfall or Shield are a reaction. You only get 1 reaction every round, so remember if you use it to cast a spell, you lose your reaction until it's your turn again. And lastly, some spells require immense concentration when casting. These spells must be held up, causing some strain on the caster. Very simply, this means that if you ever take damage when casting a concentration spell, you have to roll a Constitution saving throw to see if you can maintain the spell. The player who takes damage must make a Constitution saving throw against a DC of 10 or half of the damage received, whichever is higher. So if you take 25 fire damage from a fireball spell, you have to make a concentration check of 12. However, if you lose consciousness or die, obviously you lose your concentration. Spellcasting can be tricky and overwhelming if it's your first time, and even players who have played for years find themselves checking in the books for rules. It's okay to ask questions or need a moment to process, it's part of the game. Just remember that each spell states exactly what it does. It's easy to come into spellcasting and think everything is going to be the same for each class. It just won't be. Each spell can have a different set of rules, especially when you get into more complex spells at higher levels. Hopefully this long-winded explanation and breakdown of spells and spellcasting helped you out. I know it's a lot to take in. Leave your comments down below. What's your favorite spellcasting class? For me, it's all about wizards. I love me some Caleb Widogast. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, feed your Displacer Beasts, and we'll see you next time, adventurers.